We're at the bottom of Daf Yud Amid Beis, and we're in the middle of going through the different drushes that different Amoraim would speak about when they spoke about Torah. So we're the second line from the bottom on Yud Amid Beis, the second word in the line. Rabbi Bar Ufran Pasach Lepischal Hypershasam. Rabbi Bar Ufran, when he spoke about Purim, he started from there. It says, "V'samti kisi v'Elam." I will put my kisei in Elam. And Rashi says, "Kilam Elam is Shushan Habira." Rashi says, "Tichsiv b'sefer Daniel b'Shushan Habira shavi Elam Hamadina." So the Rebbe Shem said, "I will put my kisei in Elam. V'havadati misham melech v'sarim, and I will destroy from there a king and ministers." Melech zu Vashti. Melech is referring to Vashti. V'sarim is a Haman v'aseres plana. It says in the pasuk, and Rashi says it's in Sefer Ezra, and it says, "Ki avodim anachnu," we're servants. Uva avduseinu lo yazavnu elokeinu, and even in our avdus we didn't abandon the Rebbeinu Shalom, or the Rebbeinu didn't abandon us. V'yeitalenu chased, and Hashem showed us favor. L'fnei malchi paras, in the eyes of the malchi paras, and Rashi adds in losais aleinu michya. So even though they weren't so good to us, but they helped us a little bit. Zok the Gemara. Amosai. When did this occur? Zok the Gemara. Bisman Haman. That happened in times of Haman. When Yud Aleph Amar Aleph, we're just now the third line from the top. Zok the Hela of the Gemara back. Chanina bar Papa, Pasach la Pista, la Parshas Mehach. This is where Chanina bar Papa started from. Desherkafta enoish l'reishenu. You made that there should be goyim that want to get our heads, want to kill us. And banu be'esh v'mayim, we came through fire and water. What is this referring to? Zok the Gemara be'esh b'mei Nebuchadnezzar harasha. We came through fire in the days of Nebuchadnezzar harasha. And Rashi tells us that means he threw us into the Kivshan age. Uvamayim, and we came through water. We made Parai in the days of Parai, which was referring to Krish Yamsuf. But it's annular Voya, and eventually HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out and he made it wide for us. In Haman, that happened in the days of Haman. Rabbi Yochanan started his Purim Torah from this place. It says Zachar Chastoi Vemunos Yisrael. The Baruch remembered its chesed, and Zamunah to Klal Yisrael. Ro Chalaf She'aretz, all of the people of the world saw as Yeshua Salakenu. When did this happen? Amos Ro Kol Af She'aretz as Yeshua Salakenu. When did everybody see in the whole world that the Rebbeinu saved us? It happened b'mei Mordechai ve'Esther. Rashi says, what happened b'mei Mordechai ve'Esther? Rashi says on the fourth line, Shadavar Nigla l'Chalu Umois Shehachol Iris B'Chol Olam. They sent out letters to the whole world, which Chashverosh was in charge of. So that's how everybody knew that Klal Yisrael was saved. Rish Lakish Pasach LaPischa Lo Parshas Mehacha. Rish Lakish started the parsha for me. It says, Ari Noyam, a lion will roar. The dove shaking, and the dove will move around. Moshel Russia Al Amdol, the ruler of a rishishtik ruler on the poor nation like Klal Yisrael. Ari Noyam Zed Nebuchadnezzar Russia. That's referring to Nebuchadnezzar Russia. The pasuk says regarding Nebuchadnezzar Russia. Ola Aryeh Misuvchad. The lion came out of his den. So you see, and the Torah is referring to the Navi is referring to Nebuchadnezzar. That pasuk. Dov Shaykik, the dove is restlessly moving around. Ze Achashverosh. That's referring to Achashverosh because the Navi refers to him as a bear. The Sevei, and this is talking about the Sefer Daniel when it's describing these different malchias that were on top of Klal Yisrael. It says V'aruchiva Achrina Tinyana. Then another Chaya came out. Dom Eladoi. It was similar to a bear, and that's referring to Melech Achashverosh. The Tanya of Yosef. Elu Parsiam, these are the Persians, Sha'oichlin v'shoisin kidoiv. These are Persians who eat and drink like bears, u'musurbolim basar kidoiv, and they're they're overloaded with meat like a bear, I guess a bear before hibernation. U'megadlin sar kidoiv, and it grows hair like a bear. The ein lemanucha kidoiv, and has no rest like a bear because a bear is always moving around. Moshel Rasha Ze Haman. That's referring to Haman. Al Amdal, on the poor nation, Elu Yisrael, Shem Dalim and Amitzvahs. That's referring to Klal Yisrael when they're Dalim and Amitzvahs. It says Batzaltayim Yomech HaMikar. When you're lazy, your roof. This is a perfect pasuk for Chaim Tzvi, because if someone's lazy and doesn't take care of his leaky roof, Yimach HaMikra. Let me just see how to pronounce it. It says Batzaltayim Yimech HaMikara, meaning if you're lazy, your beams, your ceiling beams, are going to get mushy and fall apart. If you don't fix your roof, then your plywood gets moldy and wet and soggy, and then it leads to the actual trusses to start getting bad. So if someone's lazy and doesn't take care of the stitch in time, he's going to end up having 9. And if someone is lazy, he withholds his hands from fixing things in time, he's going to have dripping all over his house.
I need the word that says when I'm lazy, I don't take care of the others.
Because Klal Yisrael were lazy and they were not lazy with Torah. And of course we know what this means. It doesn't mean the sign of the Mach, he became weak or poor. Mach means an ani. If he's poor. Who is the roofer of Klal Yisrael? Who is the one who puts the beams, the ceiling over our heads? That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shenemar HaMakar Bayam Al Yosef, which is referring to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Nachem B'Yitzchak Pasach LaPitzchah LaParshas HaMechacha. Shir HaMalos. Lulei Hashem Sheyalanu. If it wasn't for HaKadosh Baruch Hu that was with us, Yoimina Yisrael, Klal Yisrael say. Lulei Hashem Sheyalanu. It wasn't for the fact that Hashem was with us. V'kum Aleinu Adam, when someone stood over us. So Zog to Gemara, Adam v'loy melech, a person standing over us, but not a real person. When was a person standing over us? It wasn't a real person. Rashi says, Adam v'loy melech ze Haman. That's referring to Haman, because Haman wasn't a king. Not a real king. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say there wasn't a real person. I misspoke. Rabba pasach lapischa laparshas mehacha. It says, "B'Rabbi satzadicha hatzadikim yismach ha'am." When the tzaddikim are b'rav, then the nation is happy. And when the Rasha is in charge, the Adam is going to crash. Let me just read a pasuk inside because I didn't have the nekudas and I don't want to mess it up. So it says, "B'vois tzaddikim yismach ha'am u'b'mshol Rasha ye'anacham." So people are celebrating, people are happy when tzaddikim are in charge, not so much when Rishoyim are in charge. Zok to Gemara. That's when Mordechai and Esther were in charge. Oh yeah, I forgot to start. I wanted to ask the item. I'm going to say the beginning of a pasuk, and I'm going to ask you to finish the pasuk. V'ha'ir Shushan. What? What's the end of the pasuk? V'ha'ir Shushan. Duvi, what's the end of the pasuk? V'ha'ir Shushan. Okay, I see everybody's happy over here. Because the last time I asked this question on Purim, half of them says Navaycha, because it says Va'ir Shushan Navaycha. But later on it says Va'ir Shushan Tzahalav V'Samecha. So over here, the item also Tzahalav V'Samecha. So that's a good sign. The item is Tefriden. Because there's two places in the Megillah. You should try it at home. Sit home and say, okay, I want to ask you a question on Purim. Va'ir Shushan, what's the next word of the pasuk? And see who says Navaycha and who says Tzahalav V'Samecha. That's right. Okay, so let's see what it says in the pasuk. So B'Rav Tzaddik Mismacham Zamor Chavesh Dechsev Yishu Sham Tzahal V'Samecha U'Mishal Reshi Yenacham Zahamun Dechsev V'Ha'ir Shushan Navaycha. So it depends on where your mind is. Remas Ma'amar Mechacha Kimi Goy Godol Asher Elokim Kroiv Meilov Hashem Elokeinu B'Chol Kareinu Alav. Let's see the pasuk inside. Let's read the next pasuk. That's the most quote. The Masais for Oisos of the Moisim of the Mochama of Yot Chazaka of Israel and Tuya of the Mayroim Gedolim the Chelasher Asa Lachem Hashem Alekechem the Mitzrayim Leinechem. So let's see the Gemara. Dash on these two close. These two psukim. Gemara and Shmuel. The Zok the head of the Gemara. It says, "Kimi goy asher lo yalakim krayv my love Hashem alkeinu v'chol kareinu." Rav Ashi Amar Mehacha. Oh, so Rav Masna learned from here because it's talking about Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Even when we're in trouble, Hakadosh Baruch Hu saves us. Here, the Gemara just quotes how Rav Masna started, but the Gemara doesn't elaborate on what he was bringing out of it. But what he was bringing out of it is that when the whole Kareinu love, whenever we call to Hashem, Hashem saved us just like He did in the times of famine. Rav Ashi Amar Mehacha says, "Anisa lekim love lekachas legoy mikav goy, kachel asher asher lekim in Mitzrayim leinecha." Just like in Mitzrayim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved us, so too in Shushan, in the days of Haman, HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved us. Vahi b'mech HaShverish. Now we're getting into the actual Megillah. Vahi b'mech HaShverish. Omarav vai v'hai. Oy vai voy. Let's see the Bach. Niskayim mashakosov b'Torah. Then it was Niskayim mashakosov b'Torah. This makartem shom lo yevecha. You're going to be sold there to your enemies. La'avodim u'l'shvachos. And the pasuk goes on, and no one wants to buy you. It's in the Toicha. This makartem shom lo yevecha la'avodim u'l'shvachos ve'ein koine. Nobody's even going to want to buy you. Zok to Gemara. Shmuel says, lo ma'astim lo ga'altam l'chaloisam. Lo ma'astim. Hashem didn't totally become misam as to throw us away. We may yavonim. Now let's think about this. What happened first, the Yevonim or Nebuchadnezzar? Nebuchadnezzar was the first Beis Hamikdash, and the Yevonim were the second Beis Hamikdash. So this is a little bit out of order. So if we look at the Tziyonim, we'll see that it really is supposed to say Bimei Aspasainis Kesa, who was later, but it was changed. Rashi says the Tziyonim say because of the censor. I guess when the Gemara was printed in those days, someone had a problem with writing us beyond the Keser as someone who heard us, and maybe they didn't like Nebuchadnezzar, so they used Nebuchadnezzar because that was more politically correct in those days. L'chaloisam, Hashem protected us from destruction. B'mehaman, lafer barisi itam, b'mei parsiim. And once again, the censor says it should say b'mei ramiyim. These are the Romans, because the Persians, because I guess this is at the time of the Romans censored it. That they shouldn't. The Romans censored the Gemara. Maybe the church. I don't know. K'ani Hashem alakayim, because I'm their boy nishloilam. Be may God b'movim. Hashem will be there to rescue us as well. That's Hashem in the future. Be may God b'movim. The Masnisa Tana. It says in the Brisa, Lo ma'astem be may kastem. Shehemaddi lahem Daniel Hananya Mishael v'Azariah. In those days, in the days of the kastem, I sent Daniel Hananya Mishael v'Azariah to save Klal Yisrael. V'lo ga'altem. And I didn't become miyas from them. I didn't reject them. We may avonim she'amadti lahem shimon atzadik b'chashmino uvano umatasyo kohen gadol. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent us a whole team to save us. L'chaloisham b'mehamon she'amadti lahem mordechai Esther. L'haver bris hitam is b'mei parsiim, and again the censor changed it. It should say b'mei ramim she'amadti lahem sobes Rebbe v'chachmei adoris. Kani Hashem alakayim, lasad lavoi, shein kol uma, v'lashan yichayah lishlok them. Eventually, no uma will be able to rule over Klal Yisrael. It says, "V'mloi terishu es yoshvei haaretz." So the pasuk there is talking about Klal Yisrael was told that they must purge all of the bad influences, all of their goyim from Yisrael. And if you don't, bad things are going to happen. So let's see what happened in this pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'mloi terishu es yoshvei haaretz mipnechem." You're not going to get rid of them. Those that remain will be they're like thorns in your eyes, and thorns in your sides. And they'll constantly harass you in your own land. That's what the Torah tells us. Well, what happened in the days of Shaul HaMelech? He was supposed to kill Agag, and he didn't. And that ended up leading to Amalek growing once again, and that led to the Tsar of Purim. Zok to Gemara weiter. It says, what I wanted to do to them, I'm going to do to you, which is what happened at the beginning by Haman. Hashem was going to destroy us, but then we do tshuva, and Hashem saves us. Achashverosh. What does the word Achashverosh come from? Omarav. It stands for Ochiv Shal Rosh Uben Gila Shal Rosh. He's a brother to the head, and he has similar features of the head.
You see, by the way, you see from the fact that Dash was killed initially, the whole thing is one big bluff on Hashem's part. It's not like Hashem wants to destroy us.
Hashem had everything prepared.
Yeah, everything prepared. It's one big scare.
So let's see what it says over here. Echab Shal Rosh Kolomer Doimeloi. He was similar to the king, and then Gila ben Mazloi named as Achas Hayeloi. So they looked alike and they acted alike. So the Gemara elaborates. Achav Shal Rosh means Achav Shal Nebuchadnezzar HaRasha. He looked like Nebuchadnezzar HaRasha. Shenikar Rosh. Nebuchadnezzar was referred to with the word Rosh. Shenemar Antu Reisha Didahava. Ben Gilai Shal Rosh, what does that mean? That he behaved like Nebuchadnezzar? Hu Harak, he killed. Hu Bigash Larak, he wanted to kill. Hu Hecher, he destroyed. Hu Bigash Lahacher, he wanted to destroy. Shenamar, it says, the Malchus Achashverosh, the Tchilas Machuzoi, in the beginning of Achashverosh's Malchus, because was sitting on Yosy Yehuda Yerushalayim, he wrote a letter that's going to harass the Yosy Yehuda Yerushalayim. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Mushmul Amar, Shahushcharu Panem Shal Yisrael, the Yom of Keshulak Deva. The Klal Yisrael had it so bad in the days of Achashverosh that their faces became black like the bottom of a pot, and Achashverosh stands for Shachar, it's a little bit scrambled, and Rosh. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Kol Shezoichrei, anybody who remembers Achashverosh, Amar Ach LaRoshei. So there's two pshatim in the Rishonim about this. One is Ach LaRoshei, woe is to me, Achashverosh caused us money problems. Or Ach LaRoshei, let that king go straight to, let that king go straight to Honeywell. Rabbi Chanina Amar, Shakoil Nasu Russian Biyamah. It was like in the days of Trudeau and the days of Biden. Everyone became poor in the days of Achashverosh. Why? For the same reason as they became poor in the days of Biden and the days of Trudeau. Shenemar Vayosim Hamelach Achashverosh Mas. He increased taxes. He increased taxes. Inflation is also a tax. So just inflation, that's right. So the king made taxes, the king impoverished the nation. Hu Achashverosh, what is it? Hu Achashverosh? It's to tell us who Berishoi mitchilasav atzoifoi. He was very consistent. He was a Rasha from beginning to end. He never had sweet thoughts or thoughts of regret. Hu Esav, the pasuk says Hu Esav. Again, we darshan Hu Berishoi mitchilasav atzoifoi. Esav was a Rasha through and through. Who doesn't vaviram? Once again, Hein Berishon Mechilasan Vatzoifah. They were always evil. Who Amelech Ochaz, which we're talking about the king Ochaz, he was a Rasha who Berishon Mechilasan Vatzoifah. Avram, who Avram? It says that in the pasuk in Navi. Avram who Avram, and we darshan who B'Tzitkoi Mechilasan Vatzoifah. Avram Avinu was a tzaddik with Chila Vatzoifah. Who Aharon and Moshe, the same thing. Hein B'Tzitkoi Mechilasan Vatzoifah. V'Dovat who Akatan. And it doesn't mean that he was short, it means he was humble. David was humble, whether he was a big knacker or whether he was a lowly person, he was always humble. Just like when he was a nobody, he always lowered himself in front of somebody who was greater than him in Torah. Even when he was a king, and the Mefarshim relate the story with David and Achitophel, how even though David was able to pass him by himself, when he was making the shittim, suddenly the water started coming up from the time and flooding the world, and he knew that he can take a piece of cloth with the Shem Hashem written on it, a piece of cheres with the Shem Hashem written on it, and put it over the hole and stop the flooding. He knows he could have done it because of the Kal V'chomer from Sota, but he didn't want to do it until he got a psak from Achitophel. Even at the peril of the world coming to the end, it was flooding. Why? Because he was mocking himself in front of his rebbeim, even when he was a king. He wasn't promoted to be the king because he wasn't from the blue-blooded lineage of royalty, of aristocracy. He just muscled his way up. He elbowed his way up to the king. There are those who say that's a maila, and there are those who say it's a chasar. At the end of the day, he was the most qualified person to be the king. And there are those who say he wasn't roy to be a king, but he used his money and his power to get the position that he really was not deserving of. Where they say, from where was he king? They're very far apart. So if you're the king from Haidu, but Kush, you're a king for a large expanse of territory. They were very close together. And we say, just like he had a good iron fist, like Haidu and Kush, they were right near each other. So too, he had the same control over the rest of the world. I heard a famous pshat that I don't see here in the Gemara, that since Haidu and Kush were together, it doesn't mean Haidu and Kush the short way. It means Haidu and Kush the long way, all the way around the globe. But the Gemara doesn't say that over there.
There's Yossi, there's a mountain range around Afghanistan, India, called the Hindu Kush Mountain.
So that's Haidu Kush.
Yes.
Yes,
Today, exists. If you look at the map, you'll see there's a mountain range called that.
Hindu Kush.
Yossi, we know that.
David, what are you saying?
I'm saying when we say the whole world, we mean that literally, because we know there was 127 countries that they ruled. There was no other countries.
No, we're soon seeing the Gemara. The Gemara says that he ruled the entire globe.
I think we're talking about the civilized world, I'm not sure if American Indian.
One in a game of Risk.
I love that game.
Right. I mean, I think David is right. They asked such a question, why didn't Alexander the Great conquer the Roman kingdom at the time? He conquered the whole world. It didn't say anywhere that he conquered the Romans. So the answer, historically, you look into it, you'll see that the Romans weren't anything special in those days. There was nothing to conquer.
Oh, I thought he needed somebody to send liberals.
Okay. So Achashverosh ruled over everybody that was important.
I hear. Okay. But how could that be? There had to have been Lubavitchers there.
We're in Rome.
Yeah.
Yes, I guess.
So I'll those eaten.
They weren't interested in Rome.
Okay. We also say, Kihu roida b'chol ever hanar mitivsach vad azo. So that I'm not sure which king that is speaking about. It's not Achashverosh. Let's see the pasuk inside. Who roida b'chol ever hanar mitivsach vad azo b'chol malcha ever hanar v'shalom hayolai michol avodov misavim. I guess it's speaking about one of the kings. I'm not sure if Rashi. Oh, sorry, what Shlomo Melech it says. Ksiv b'Shlomo. So Shlomo Melech ruled over this entire area. So we darshan there, similar to what we darshan over here, and that is Rav Shmuel Chadam Ativsach b'Soif Olam v'Aza b'Soif Olam, and they're very far apart. Chadam Ativsach v'Aza b'Hadeh. They're together. Shem Shamalach al Tivsach v'Aza Kach Malach al Kol. Sheva v'Eshim u'Meyam. He was king over 127 Medinas. He started small. He first was king over 7. And then he added 20 to the 7. So he was at a total of 27. And then he added another 100 to his portfolio. And then he was king over 127 Medinas. That's Gemara. And the drasha is because it says Sheva ve'esrim umeya, and it's even out of order. It doesn't say meya ve'esrim ve'sheva. The Sheva ve'esrim umeya, each one individual. Ushnei chaya Amram, it says that the years of Amram was Sheva ushloishim uma'ashav, 137 years old. Mar darshas beit. What are you going to darshan by Amram? So tomorrow, shiny hacha to kroy yiserahu. Here we have an extra pasuk. You know why? Because it already says Michti. We already know the territory that Achashverosh ruled over from Haidu to Kush. Why do I need to give a listing of numbers? Sheva, the Eshem Me'em Dina Lamali, Shemami Ladrasha, to teach us this drasha. Not that, and the drasha is not that he was a total 100, rather he kept on adding the amount. He started off with 7, he added 20, not he increased to 20, but he added 20 to the 7, then he added 100 to the 27.
You would only know what Haidu and Kush is at that time. But the Megillah is the Doimus. So because the Megillah is the Doimus, eventually we're not going to know what Haida was pushing. You see, we're a little bit confused. It tells us 127.
I hear, but nowadays we don't know what 127 means either. It's small, it's big. What was 127 in those days, where that meant the whole world. Ton of
127 countries.
That's pretty good. I mean, in Europe, it's like every block is another country. Ton of how did he control them? I don't know. Ton of Shloisha Mocha B'Kippah. So you're talking about the whole world. 3 people ruled the entire globe. Kippah is referring to the entire globe. Ve'elohein Achav v'Achashverosh v'Nebuchadnezzar. Is Nebuchadnezzar taken out by the censor? Let me see. There's no. Nebuchadnezzar is put before Achashverosh because in fact Nebuchadnezzar was before Achashverosh. Achav d'chsiv Chai Hashem Alekecha im yesh goyim mamlocha asher sholach Adoni shem levakshecha. The king said, "I swear that I sent letters to everyone, to everywhere." Meaning, he's sending letters to his kingdom. So you see that he's saying that he was king over the whole world. If he wasn't king, right? He's swearing everybody that he sent a messenger there. He must be ruling over there. Nebuchadnezzar, how do we know that he ruled the world? Any nation that doesn't put his neck under Melech Babel, once again showing that he is in charge of every single nation. Achashverosh had Amara. Achashverosh, we already said, Mahdi push 127 Medinas.
Funny, Achashverosh is the only one that believed it, because the other two could very well just have been boasting. Every king likes to boast.
Very good. The Gemara is going to ask these questions. Beautiful, beautiful kasha. So let's see the Gemara. Siman Shastach, which refers to Shloima, Sancheir, Dayavish, and Koresh. Are there no other people who rule the globe? They're Shloima. So Gemara, Shloima Salach Malchusa. He wasn't always king. At the end, he lost his kingdom. That's good if you learn that he lost his kingdom and he never retrieved it. He became a king again. So all's well that ends well. Why don't we list Shloima also as one of the Malachim that ruled the globe? So Gemara, Shloima Milsa Chrisi Havavei. He had something else, a different feature so therefore we don't talk about him ruling the globe. Shemalach al Yonim v'al Atachton. He not only ruled the world, but he also ruled the Shadim. Well, that's what David Zolti said. It means the inhabited world. So what does it mean? So Rashi says Al Yonim is referring to Shadim. Why not the Malachim? I think the Ben Yayada says, and I'm not familiar with these things, the Shadim float around in the heavens, but they're below the Rakia. The Malachim are above the Rakia. So
what's the Tachtonim? I thought the
Tachtonim is on the ground, people who are on the inhabited world. We're the Tachtonim, correct. That's right. Correct. The more about Havach Sencherev. Sencherev also, we can show ruled the whole world. Mi b'chol eloi kei ha'rotzei sa'ela asher hitzilos ha'asam yodi. Who in the whole world saved their land for me? So Gemara, ha'ika Yerushalayim v'lekovsha. He did capture all the world, but he never captured Yerushalayim. The Yavish Malka, the Yavish the king, Kosav l'chol amamaya, Umya v'lishna, the Dairin l'chol ara, Shlamchain Yaska. So he once again he sent to the whole world his letters. So tomorrow Sheva there were 7 countries that he wasn't king over, and we know there was a total of 127 countries from Achashverosh, and he was only king over 120. T'chsiv Shefer Kadam Yavish. The Hekem al Malchusa la'achshtarpanaya meya ve'esri. So you see that he only had 120. In fact, the more about Iga Kurish. What about the king of Kurish? Chsiv Kai Amar Kurish Melech Paras Kol Mamlocha Yisaaretz. He boasted all of the kingdoms of the world. Nosan li Hashem. Zok the Gemara there. Hasav ishtabuche hu dekam ishtabach benafshi. There he was just showing off. So I'm Swede's going to ask. So maybe Nebuchadnezzar was also just showing off. That's what Chaim Tzvi is going to ask. And I'm going to answer Chaim Tzvi with one of the svaros that he once told me himself. And that is, you could make a lie about something that's far away, but you can't make a lie about something that's right here. So when Koresh was saying this, he wasn't specific. He didn't refer to anything specific. So he could have just been boasting. Or there are those who learn that Koresh was promised by the Rebbeinu Shalom that if he rebuilt the Beis Hamikdash and he helps the Eden completely, then he'll rule the world. And he was promising based on that, but he didn't fulfill his t'nai, and therefore he didn't get it. Well, Nebuchadnezzar, when he was boasting, it was right there by the Medinas where they could have easily right. He says it was more concrete, so they could catch him on his lie. So therefore, his words had more credibility. Okay, now we're going to get into an interesting Gemara. So it says when the king was sinning, and then it says in the third year. So the question is it right when he sat on his throne, or was it the third year? Zog to Gemara, Amarava, my kisheves. What does it mean, kisheves? It means after he calmed down and he was confident enough to start exerting his force. What does it mean? Why wasn't he confident? Why did it take 3 years? Amar Belshazzar chashav. Belshazzar thought that it reached a time where the Golus was supposed to be over, and it didn't end. So he figured he's safe. And then he started using the Kelim of the Beis Hamikdash, and things didn't end well for him. He ended up getting killed. But I have it all figured out, and I'm not going to make a mistake. So it took 3 years of him being confident that now we're at the point where Golus Bubble should have ended based on the Nobi's promise. It didn't, so now I'm good to go. HaKadosh Baruch Hu must have abandoned Klal Yisrael. So let's see what it was. Mahi, it says, Kilufi Melois Lebavel Shiv Mishana Efkodet. The Novi said, Yirmiyahu said that after Babel has 70 years, that's when I'm going to redeem you. And Rashi says, Lefi Melois Lebavel, Kesavarhu Lamalchus Bavel Miyoim Shenatla Bavel Malchus. So Belshazzar's thought was that the moment Bavel took over any type of Malchus, from the beginning of that Malchus, that's when the 70 years start. And that would have ended with Nebuchadnezzar, Notel Malchus, the Asherchaten Melech Asher. Uksiv, Lamalos Lecharbesh Yushalayim Shiv Mishana. When there's a Churban of 7 years. So what does it say? Chasha, if he figured as follows, he made a mathematical calculation. Chashav Arba'in v'chomesh to Nebuchadnezzar. He counted 45 years of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, and after Nebuchadnezzar was in charge, Avil Meroidach took over. So 40 and 23 is 63, and now retired to today, and 2 of his own years. So retired to Rashi. The Ashkechan the Belshazzar Molech Tlashim. Belshazzar was a king for 3 years. That's the Neil B'Shna Shalosh L'Malchus Belshazzar Melech Chazin Elai. So let's figure this out. Where do we have 70? Hashivim. So let me just figure out where you have the 70. He started from Amar Belshazzar Chashav Ta Nachshir Latila. Kilafim Elois L'Babel Shiv Mishana Efkod Etzchem. So let me look back at Rashi because I'm a little bit confused from the Cheshvan. Kilafim Elois L'Babel. Kesavarhu L'Malchus Bavel. He thought he was counting from when Malchus Bavel start. Yom Shenot L'Babel Malchus. That would be Nebuchadnezzar because he took the Malchus from Asher Chadin Melech Asher. So therefore, he took 45 years of Nebuchadnezzar plus 23 years. So 45 and 23, is 68. Oh, that's a mistake. 45 and 23, 68. I made a simple mathematical mistake. And then you have his 2 years brought it to 70. So what did he do? Now it's time to party. He took out the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash, and he used them. So, and that was a mistake. In fact, the Gemara, this is all based on Nebuchadnezzar being a king for 45 years. And Nebuchadnezzar minalam the Arban the Chamesh Nin Malach. How do we know that he was king for 45 years? So talking about Amar Mar, Galu b'Sheva, Yidden went into Galus in the 7th year. Galu b'Shmoina, Yidden went into Galus in the 8th year. Galu b'Shmoina Esrei, they went into Galus in the 18th year. Galu b'Tesha Esrei. All these years were actually the same year. The different years that we've listed are just based on different starting points. So let's first get clear what happened, and then we'll see how all these numbers fit in. So first, what happened was Nebuchadnezzar came in and took over. And when he took over, he put in place the Yayakim of the king. Yayakim wasn't such a good king. Now, I'm sorry, he came in when Yayakim was already king. Yayakim was already a king for 3 years. So let's see Rashi over here. Kroi Kadosh Beseder Olam. In the 3rd year of Yayakim's kingdom, Ba Nebuchadnezzar Yerushalayim. So Nebuchadnezzar took over in Yerushalayim at the 3rd year that Yayakim was king. Vayitna Hashem es Yayakim b'yadav. Yayakim was in his hands. Rashi, Avshalom king, v'aleilei molach elo b'shnas arba leYayakim. We know that he only became king in the 4th year of Yayakim. Shenamar b'sefer Yirmiyah, hadavar shahoya b'shana haravius leYayakim, he shana rishana Nebuchadnezzar. And here we're saying Nebuchadnezzar came already in his 3rd year. So what it really means is when he took over for 4 years, Yayakim was listening to the king, and then he started fighting. So it says after Nebuchadnezzar came over and took over Yerushalayim in the days of Yayakim's kingdom, for the first 3 years, Yayakim cooperated with Nebuchadnezzar. And then he rebelled for 3 years. After 3 years of listening and accepting the control of Nebuchadnezzar, then Yayakim rebelled and rejected the control of Nebuchadnezzar. For 3 years, he was fighting and rejecting Nebuchadnezzar. So that means after Nebuchadnezzar took over, 3 years passed where Yayakim was listening, and then another 3 years passed when Yayakim was rebelling, and then after those 3 years, Nimtzar b'yadai v'hargai, that's when Yayakim was killed by Nebuchadnezzar. When the sky by Kavuras Chamor Yikaver, he was buried like a donkey, and then he had to put in another puppet king. So Nebuchadnezzar put in Yayachin B'nai, he put in the son of Yayakim as the king, as the replacement for his father. And Rashi tells us, Viter. So his Yayatim told him, I don't understand, the father rebelled, and now you're going to put a son in power? That's not such a good idea. Masla Amr, there's a moshel, Mikalba Bisha, from a bad dog, Gur Yatavel Nafach. A good dog's not going to come out of that. So that's why a year later he decided, I got to get rid of Yayachin as well. That's when he threw out Yayachin and he put Tzidkiyahu in place. Nimtzas, it comes out that Golus Yayachin was B'shna Sheva Lekibush Yayakim. So in the 7th year of after Yayakim was taken over, that's when Golus Yayachin was. So again, the Nebuchadnezzar comes in. We count 3 good years where Yayakim was behaving, 3 bad years where Yayakim rebelled, after which he was killed. Then Yayakim was put in, and a year later, in year 7, Yayakim was thrown out. So we're going to see that we're saying this is in year 7 since Yayakim was taken over by Nebuchadnezzar, but the pasuk refers to it sometimes as year 8. So it must be that it was in the 2nd year of his Malchus, because if it says that it was in the 8th year of Malchus Nebuchadnezzar, and we know that 7 years after Nebuchadnezzar took over Yerushalayim, he threw out Yehoiachin, it must be that Nebuchadnezzar was a king a year before, so by the time Nebuchadnezzar was a king 8 years, he threw out Yehoiachin. So let's see these cheshbonos over here. So once again, it says, so now we'll figure out the cheshbon. Golu b'sheva, what does it mean? They went into Golus in the year 7. 7 years from when Yayakim was captured or was controlled by Nebuchadnezzar, 3 years where he listened, 3 years where he rebelled and killed. Then was Yehoiachin became king, and then he was sent off in the 7th year. So when it says Golu b'sheva, means the 7th year of Yayakim being taken over by Nebuchadnezzar, you count from then 7 years, that's when Golus Yoyachin was. Nebuchadnezzar was a king already 1 year before he took over from Yoyakim. So if you're counting from the time Nebuchadnezzar became king, then Yoyachin was sent into Golus in the 8th year. I'm sorry. That's the 8th of Nebuchadnezzar. That's the 8th of Nebuchadnezzar. Golu b'shmoina esrei. If you use the lashon of that they went to Golus in the 18th year, where are we counting from? We're counting l'kibush Yoyakim. And what are we talking about? We're talking about Golus Tzidkiyahu. We said that after Yoyachin was sent into Golus in year 7, that's when Tzidkiyahu was put into place. And Tzidkiyahu was in place for 11 years, and that's why 11 plus 7 is 18. So 18 years is the count to when Tzidkiyahu was sent into Golus. Nebuchadnezzar, which would be 19 years from the time that Nebuchadnezzar became king. So it's pretty simple. Nebuchadnezzar became king. The next year he took over Yerushalayim and he was controlling Yoyakim. Yoyakim cooperated for 3 years, and then rebelled for 3 years and then was killed. So now we're in year 7 or 8. The next year, which is year 7 of Yoyakim rejecting, of Yoyakim being taken over from Nebuchadnezzar, Yoyakim was king, Yoyakim was sent into Golus, and then 11 years later, Tzidkiyahu was sent into Golus as well. Domamar, Shoni Rishon Kibush Ninveh. The first year Nebuchadnezzar captured Ninveh. Shniya Kibush Yoyakim, and in his second year, Nebuchadnezzar's second year, he captured Yoyakim. Uchsiv, it says, Vayibish Shloshim V'Sheva Shana L'Golus Yoyachin. It was in the 37th year of Golus of Yoyachin, Melech Yehuda. V'Shnei Mas HaChodesh, on the 12th month, V'Ezim V'Chamish LaChodesh. Then Nasa Avil Merudach Melech Bovel, B'Shnas Malchusoi, Es Rosh Yoyachin Melech Yehuda. That's when Avil Merudach had already taken over at that point, and he took Yoyachin out of jail. He was in Bovel already, in jail in Golus. V'Yoytzei Oisim V'Beis HaKel, he took him out of jail. Tamli Utlosin V'Sheva, if you have 38 and 7, 38 and 7 is 45. You have the 45 years of Nebuchadnezzar's rule. The Esun Utlas Davil Meroidach, and then you have the 22 years of Avil Meroidach. So 37 and 23 is 50. 37 and 23 is 50. Is 60, right? Right? Let's start again. Tamni Klossen V'Sheva. Maybe I should look at Rashi to get a little bit of help over here. Okay, so let's have a look. Lamadnu, we learn Shemalach Avil Meroidach Mishnas Lamed Zayin LaGolus LaYachim. The Pasuk tells us that when Yoyachin was in Golus already for 37 years, that's when Avil Meroidach became king. So we know Nebuchadnezzar was already king 8 years before Golus Yoyachin, and 37 years later, so you have 37 plus 8. 37 plus 8 is 45, right? So if I'm counting from when Nebuchadnezzar became king, I have 45 years at the time when Yoyachin was taken out of jail. Shmoina, V'Lamed Zayin, 8 and 37 is 45. Right? Then you have Chav Gimel of Avil Merudach, because we're talking about Achashverosh now. So after Nebuchadnezzar was done, after the 45 years of Nebuchadnezzar, then there was 23 years of Avil Merudach. So 45 and 23 is 68, right? Who based the Belshazzar, and then there was the 2 years of Belshazzar, and that was Belshazzar's cheshbon that he's ready to go. So let's see what happened.
All of these years, right, are always complete years. Like what happens if you know that if there's 2.5 years, then it's 3 years. So you can't make kushboinus like this.
You want to know if it's the exact same month?
They can be the
I'm
same.
not sure. Okay, maybe the Gemara talks about it later. So Gemara Hashivin, so that's where Belshazzar made his cheshbon. Amar, he said, Hashta Vave Sulay Mifraki. At this point, that the Geula didn't come, I don't have to worry that it'll come. And he used the Kalim of the Beis Mikdash, and that was a mistake. You tried to be misgoya over the Rebbeinu Shloim, ulemanaya debaisei hayisav kadamach, and you used in front of you his Kalim. Uchsiv bey the Leila Katel Belshazzar Malchak Kisdoy, and he's going to be killed. Uchsiv v'dayovish mada kibo machusa kvar shnin shdin v'tartin. So let's see what Rashi says. Belshazzar clearly made a mistake. I'm going to figure it out. So instead of starting from when Nebuchadnezzar became king, I'm going to count from when the Golus started. So let me just see the psukim inside. Let me see Lamed, which is quoting from Sefer Daniel. Let's see where we are by Lamed. I can't find. Oh, here it is. Okay, then it says the Daryavash Kibel Moda Kibel Malchusa Kvashnin Shitin Vitartin. He was king already 62 years. So let's see what it says over here. The Daryavash Moda Kibel Malchusa Kvashnin Shitin Vitartin Amr Il Mitatoy. Chashverosh said that Belshazzar made a mistake. Ana Chashivna Veloitim. I'm going to make a better cheshbon. I'm not going to make a mistake. It doesn't say Miksiv LaMalchus Bavel. Yirmiyahu didn't say that 70 years from the establishment of Malchus Bavel, that's when the Gul is going to come. He said Libavel Ksiv. And let's see the pasuk inside. The pasuk inside is Ches. So let me just see the pasuk. Kichayamar Hashem Kilafi Melois Libavel Shiv Mishana. Not Malchus Bavel. My Libavel, Legolus Bavel. It means Legolus Bavel. So Kama Betziran, how many years are we missing? Tamni, we're missing 8 years. Why? Because Golus Bavel didn't start till Yehoiachin was sent into Golus, which was 8 years later. So Choshev Ayil Chilifayu, so now that he needs an extra 8 years, so where did he find his 8 years? Chadid the Belshazzar, 1 year of Belshazzar, because Belshazzar was king for 3 years. And Belshazzar started, his 70 ended after 2 years of his rule. So now he's adding 1 more year. The Chumash to the Yavish, and 5 years of the Yavish's rule. That's 6 years. Now he needs 2 more. The Chumash to the Yavish and Karish, between the Yavish and Karish are 5 years, but tied to today, and 2 years of his own rule. Because we said Achashverosh, it was in his 3rd year, it's not Shalosh Lamochusa. So the Gemara asked at the beginning of the Sugya, it says Kesheves HaMelech Achashverosh, which sounds like right when he became king. Then it says Shalosh Lamochai, which is the 3rd year. The answer is he needed to wait for the 3rd year of his malchus to make sure that according to his new cheshbon, it was taka the end of the goals. Hashivin, even the chaz of the model of Shivin, once he figured according to his calculation that already 7 years passed, below Yifrik and Klal Yisrael was not yet redeemed from the golos. Amar, he said, Hashta Vadai Suloi Mifriki. Now for sure we're safe. For sure there's not going to be any more golos. Avak Manda Bemakasha Vishtamish B'hu. Ba Satan Verika B'neim. The Satan came and danced amongst them for Hargas Vashti and killed Vashti. So the Mefarshim asked, when Belshazzar made the mistake, Belshazzar got killed. When Achashverosh made the mistake, Vashti got killed. I forgot the teretz. I'll have to. Yeah? Oh, the Arshkel said it?
Yeah.
So what does he answer? Right. It also takes away Achashverosh's connection to the king, to the kingdom.
I remember reading, it says here, that Ben Yael explained that since using the vessel of the very consciously followed his president's example, it's also thus contributed in no small measure to Achashverosh's sin. Hence, since the two kings were partners, and Achashverosh's Avera, justice demanded they share the punishment as well. This Vashti was Belshazzar's only child, her death signaled the demise of his father beneath a major penalty indeed. Nor was Achashverosh unaffected by Vashti's death, and why was a full victim of his life in a very real sense, the son of arrows previously usually brought Achashverosh as well.
So, let me just finish the Vashab Achashverosh seemed to have made a very reasonable mathematical calculation. So, he also made a mistake. He shouldn't have counted from when Yehoiachin went to Golish. He should have counted from 11 years later when the actual Churban came out. Okay, so let's stop here. You saying?
I remember reading that Achashverosh deserved it. He just kept alive because
we needed him.
We needed him. And then 11 years later, right? Meaning the whole Purim story lasted about 9 or 11 years. Right?
9 years.